Welcome all of you. Thanks for joining in. Welcome Siyog and Harsimrat. Thanks for accepting this invite. We're really looking forward to knowing your views. And thank you, Rutger and Sunil, for being on this panel. So I'll just put the context and then hand over the mic to the panelists over here. Today, the topic is on the changing paradigm in planning. What we are going to discuss is whether in this new normal world, are we seeing a change in the planning process, the change in planning requirements, especially with reference to the manufacturing companies, where there is a need for more real-time inclusion of data and planning, and also the integration of the shop floor planning process with the demand planning at a macro level. And what we would want to learn from Nivi, which is a startup in the predictive analytics space, helping manufacturing companies with their planning processes. The response that they're seeing in the market, being a startup, the demand they're seeing, they have a presence both in Europe and in India. So we want to understand from their perspective what their customers are asking and what is their observation. We would also want to understand from Sunil and Rutger whether they see this trend and they went with what Nivi is observing, whether they see this trend to be lasting longer. And what is their own observation about the whole shift in this planning requirement of the companies. At a very high level, this is our expectation today. So over to you. I would request CEO to introduce Nivi. Siyog is a CEO and founder of Nivi. Also, I must mention for the sake of our audience that Nivi was one of the 5 startups that was selected by Airbus for its accelerator program, and they have never looked back ever since. Doing very, very well. And Siyog will tell us more about Nivi to get started and his observations about the planning process. And Sunil and Rutger take it from there. Over to you, Siyog. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Rishi. And thank you, everyone, for giving us an opportunity to present our views in terms of planning. So before we jump into the subject, I wanted to quickly introduce Harsimrat and myself. Both of us are co-founders of Nivi. So we are a data analytics company specializing in the manufacturing world for manufacturing companies. We are based out of Bangalore and we have significant presence in the US, not only in terms of customers, but also in terms of the people. Now, our essential goal is to make manufacturing more visible and transparent, efficient and autonomous. So when I say visible and transparent, what we mean is it is just not about providing the real-time information, but it is more about understanding the interactions between various processes and parameters which impact the outcome. And as we are working with multiple customers, as we are working with new prospects, where we are discussing about options in terms of how data analytics can help them really impact the outcome. And invariably, discussions are getting centered, or basically planning is started playing a very, very significant role in terms of their focus area. Now, last 6-7 months, we are noticing this trend, and I was discussing with Rishi, and he said that let's have a larger forum where we can discuss these new trends which we as startups are observing as we are walking the market. We are noticing these trends, so we thought we will share that in front of you. So there are different types or different levels at which planning process happens, which I'm sure all of you being professionals would know, but just for the sake of completeness, I would talk about, there are a lot of customers where MRP, MRP2 runs are extensively getting used as far as the material planning is concerned. Some of them are also upgraded to APS, where you have the advanced production scheduling, everything is being done. And some of them are really at low level, where only the demand data which is flowing in, and some people with Excel sheets are creating the detailed plan. Now, very clearly that understanding is there that that process, planning process being the fountainhead of all the activities, it is imperative if we are talking about optimizing end-to-end operations, planning needs to be really taken into account. That is anyway, that's a known aspect. Where people are facing challenges with even APS or advanced planning is the plan which is getting created, let's say, for a week, which is getting created or on a daily basis, it is not taking into account what exactly is happening right now on the shop floor. For example, there are few breakdowns which have happened, and those are actually causing tremendous disruption. The simplest example I can give you is for a semiconductor company with whom we were talking to. So the semiconductor process essentially is, a lot of things happen in parallel, and then it gets routed to another set of parallel machines, and again it becomes sequential. The challenge and since it's a very fast manufacturing process, the challenge they have is the plan which they have created in the morning is actually no longer valid moment there are two or three machines which are becoming down. Moment they are down, everything is stopping. People are rerouting everything manually because you cannot have those runs scheduled on a daily basis. So this is one aspect which is driving a lot of companies. So we spoke with a chemical company which they had a very similar problem. So they have an issue in terms of how much pivot product needs to be created. It is based on the demand as well as based on the current structure or how much work currently is being done. Because in chemical world, it is very important to maintain the right level of work in product inventory. Now, the disruptions on the ground are actually causing huge issue in terms of how much WIP should be created. Another example was for a very large company which was making turbines, they are making very large equipments. Now, if there is a delay in the work on a day-to-day basis, either due to asset or due to lack of information from lack of skills from the people, if the work gets delayed, the challenge is whole plan becomes disrupted for that day. And a lot of times, in some cases, we are seeing that planning runs are done once in a day, but for most of it, it is weekly. Most of it is weekly, or in certain cases, monthly as well. Now, to continue with such disconnection for a week is becoming very, very challenging. And considering the economic condition, what we are into, every level of optimization is really needed now. So the requirement which we are seeing from the planning community is that we have a top-down view very nicely defined. You have MRP2, you have APS in certain cases. What is happening is below that is now completely manual, or even though the plan is being given, there is no feedback which is coming from the ground as easily as that. So requirement is not only top down. Now people are expecting that it should also be coupled by the bottoms up. Now, when we say bottoms up, we are saying the current status of production. What exactly is happening now? What is the current status of my asset? What is the current metrics in terms of the plan? Are there any changes which have happened? Are there any new aspects to be taken into account? For example, the material itself, which was supposed to arrive in the morning, has not arrived. Now, what happens? So this integration is where people are seeing great value. And planning being the fountainhead, as I was mentioning, this approach now seems to be catching up as one of the most important area where process optimizations are going to happen. So as we do this integration, there are multiple aspects to be taken into account. First and foremost is how frequently are we going to run the plan? Because let's say we are able to provide the insights from the ground to the planning process. The question is how frequently this needs to be run. Should it be run on a daily basis? Should it be run on an hourly basis? That is something which will evolve. But this is a clear trend which we are noticing. This also answers partially one important question which people are always asking, like in this industry 4.0 paradigm or in this IoT world, how IoT is impacting planning. Most of the use cases are being, which we had seen so far, were related to supply chain, our ability to anticipate the material on the right time at right place. But this is something which is very interesting, which is coming from bottoms up, that link real-time production to the planning process. And now, if you see the picture which is emerging, is very interesting picture. Now there is no longer disconnection between the demand planning, there is no and the day-to-day planning activity and production. Now it is coming out completely cohesively. There will be few evolutions, there will be industry specific things which we will need to take into account, but this is a trend which is very quickly catching up. And being and in this whole value chain, if you see planning being the starting process, very clearly people will be focusing more and more on this. The another aspect now, which as planners, or as subject matter experts, you will be debating as well, is about micro and macro level of planning. Will there be a distinction, as we are able to do it today, that something is a macro planning and something is as a micro planning? Will that distinction remain? That is something which we will have to see as we go forward. From the place where we are and what we are seeing from the customers, clearly this distinction is actually getting faded away, and everything is becoming very cohesive. We talk about ERP integrating the different value chains of manufacturing, and that started giving a lot of benefits to the world. So similar thing is consolidation. We can see that happening within the planning space itself. There would not be distinction between these two things. Another aspect which is getting enabled because of this new paradigm is uh, uh, the make to stock sub assemblies. A lot of times people focus on the main line where the manufacturing is done, and then especially in discrete we have seen that a lot of sub assemblies are created as made to stock. Now if we are able to integrate the planning data with the real time production data, the immediate impact in terms of inventory values or in terms of optimization is going to be on the critical sub assemblies, which are currently being done as made to stock. And if this approach converts that also into make to order, then this will have a significant impact on a lot of companies. Uh, and the value or the cost value or the monetary value which will get unlocked because of making the sub assembly also as close to JIT, that is going to be really a game changer in terms of the value. So these are the few aspects which I thought I will bring in front of august audience like yours. You being
Great.
there.
Thank you very much, Suyog. I think you have set the tone very nicely. I think I will just now chip in with a few thoughts that I have, and then Rutger can take it forward. In fact, what struck me first was when you were talking about the bedrock being the core planning engine and the quality and level of data. Okay, increasingly ever since COVID struck last 5-6 months, we have all been hearing a lot about agile, flexible, and responsive supply chains. Okay, where everything is demand driven. So that means your production planning and supply planning has to be very closely coupled with what is happening in the marketplace. Correct? So that means the underlying assumption is that any company X or Y that you go to for implementation should have some level of layout design and process design which takes into account these considerations. And to my sense, this could be a challenge, okay, because technology comes in later. But how do you know that today their systems are capturing the right amount of data? What is the complexity of material flows? At what levels are they capturing data? Now many companies may not have an ERP also. They may have a standalone production scheduling system. Okay, so just to take your discussion forward, where does setup like Nivi come in, and what sort of partnerships you can think of where you're actually able to integrate the demand factors on happening at the marketplace, so that supply can be influenced accordingly or manufacturing can be influenced accordingly. I think this is where I will start if I were to really address this. Any views and thoughts? Maybe Rutger can chip in later.
Yes, I can. In the first stage, let's try to make the problem a little bit simpler, to take out the things that will not change. One thing that does not change today is customer demand, customer requirements, right? The environment is different, but the customer demand and the requirements of customers to deliver a product in a best possible quality for an acceptable price as quickly as possible, that does not change. So the demand is, even if there's a shift from brick and mortar to online, and that can change back a little bit, but we may see this change for a prolonged time. A lot of that aspect is not changing. What also is not changing is the ability of humans to process data. Right, there's only so much you can do. So we will always have a company process that creates plans, right, on a relatively high level that need to be broken down for various functions in the company, including production. But this plan is also used for budget. And nobody is going to change a budget every day, right? The budget is for a year or a quarter, or, well, that's about the maximum. However, when we go into planning, let's say our field of play, right, then we can start to take that plan and make it as adaptable as possible for changing circumstances like we have today. And once we start doing that, we come to the limits of what people can do. So we must really see, and that's where NUI comes in, of course, right? What can we do to make our production, in this case, as well as possible, connected to the customer demand? In many companies, you cannot even afford, a lot of systems. This will be based on experience, right, or on spreadsheets, and just living by the day. And then somebody clever stands up and says, "Well, let's build a bit more stock, right, a bit more inventory or WIP inventory, and so we can at least keep our customer reasonably satisfied." When you get more complex industries, more complex markets, more larger markets, right? Then in the first place, I guess, to connect plans that come from upstairs and that are absolutely, that's demand or finance driven, but they should be connected, right? And the reality of the shop floor, to bring it together, we will need more technology and people who can handle that. So it means agility of teams, right, that have to be adjusted to these new circumstances. Maybe even machines that are cheaper to change in terms of what they can produce at which moment, and reduce the cost of changing manufacturing processes at short notice, because the actuals kick in and the plan changes quickly. So it's not only the software, but software could be leading above a minimum, let's say, size of company, right? How we're going to deal with this problem. In the first place, let me recognize the problem that has been stated, right? The more and more live data become available, the more difficult it becomes every day to keep the plan. But do you want to change the plan always? No. I think that's creating more havoc than it does well. So each company or each industry must decide for themselves what is the cutoff for a plan to be changeable. Right? If we have a quarterly plan, it's a quarterly plan. And you can follow how much you deviate from it. And you can give pre-warnings to the market to say we'll not make it. But you're not going to change that plan every day because a product hasn't arrived, a raw material or so. Correct. So that you must have a clear cutoff. Under that, we can reprocess and as many times as possible as humans and machines can process it. And above that, keep it stable. And that's where for a startup that creates a beautiful software product becomes a second aspect. You need to be realistic about how do you consult your customers or potential customers on how to use it and when to use it. And on your own commercial side, focus on the ones that you can really help. Absolutely,
Rutger. I think you hit the nail on its head. In fact, I was coming to that aspect as well. In fact, when you approach a company or some sort of a business, how do you develop a business case? In fact, I think that is you start. Like Rutger rightly said, different companies of varying layouts, models, scales, and sizes will have different problems. Now, some company may have problems with their fundamental scheduling logic itself. Somebody else may have, issues with quality of their products. A third company may have issues with what you call output. Some company may have issues with their productivity. So basically, I think, one will have to basically tailor, sort of, have an approach which is tailor-made to every company and setup, I think, because a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. That is my sense. And again, as Rutger rightly said, there could be several challenges with regard to data itself. How are we managing the data? Is it relevant? Is it up to date? Is it near real time? Because in my experience, at least of 17, 18 years having worked in India, I think we have never looked beyond, tier 1. And when it comes to consumers, we have never, looked at, beyond our, first level of channel partners.
Mm-hmm.
So getting real-time data and what is happening on the ground and integrating that into your supply stream, I think still appears to be a challenge, at least as far as our geography goes. And I think that will also pose, challenges for Newey as well, I guess. When you're really talking about, establishing the supply-demand connect, I think there are other challenges that might crop up. That is, my understanding, because that's how to approach it. I think you can't really go with a plug-and-play solution directly, that can work.
Absolutely. Well, you can focus on making tailor-made products for some companies and tailor-made products that connect to other software, to ERP systems that you can enhance with this flexible planning solution, manufacturing planning solution, right? And maybe stand on 2 legs. It's absolutely conceivable. Depends on how much effort you can put into your sales aspect. But this flexibility and limitations. Also important is if you introduce such a product, you don't need always the project managers to help introduce it or even help sell it internally. You need the guys who will use it and who have the experience and who can understand, yes or no, this is usable for us. Or if it's not usable, but the boss says we will use it, then what do you need to get it done, to benefit to the maximum of it, right? It's I've seen quite a lot of startups in the high-tech space here in the Netherlands, and what you see a lot is that they focus on their product. They're extremely proud of it, often with very good reasons, but they forget that there are so many more, business aspects around introducing a product. Same apply for software, right? If it's a machine or a piece of software, more difficult because you can't see it, right? But you have to be clearly explaining, okay, this is the product, what it can do, and this is the impact it can have on your company in terms of positively, of course, how much savings you can make, for example, or how much faster you can work and service your customer better. Or on the other side, what do you need to implement it? And by the way, doing those things, making, for example, team or organizational changes, it will help you grow anyway. So you become almost a consultant for the whole business, that you help with just a piece of software that you developed.
Yeah. Thanks, Rutger. I just wanted to ask you and Sunil in terms of, so I definitely get the challenges side of the picture where you are pointing out to the data availability as well as the teams or the professionals ability to work on these sophisticated systems, so readiness of the employees. But even before that, what I wanted to understand from both of you is, do you see this change happening in terms of the requirements from the companies internally of the need of this real-time managing the data and planning and integrating the top macro demand planning to the shop floors, keeping the challenges aside for a moment, but is there a now inherent need which is stronger than ever before for this to happen, and which would definitely be catered by the startups like Newey to pitch in with their products? And of course, they would be facing challenges that you are pointing out, which happens whenever any change happens, right? And over a period of time, it gets evolved and gets streamlined. But from your sense, Rutger and Sunil, from either of these two geographies, how do you see companies? You think this is a short term, or you think this change will become permanent now, the need for this real-time planning?
So the need for permanently doing more real-time planning will come with our ability, that we are learning now, right, to do that well. And this is a great experiment in this sense, right? This crisis, to check how can we improve more live data as an effect on our business. I think what comes first is the process. What we see in Europe, and that may be culturally different in India, is that leaders, the serious leaders, start to come downstairs and create teams with the people downstairs to manage the crisis. They have no other choice. They can stay upstairs with their CFOs and make beautiful plans, but it will not help in such crisis where you need to be every day on the floor. So it creates a very different environment of managing your day-to-day business. It means that the top-down and bottom-up is getting much more frequent than before. And that requires, by the way, information and software to support such meetings, right? So that's again where you becoming. I see such changes absolutely. And I was very happy to see it. It's a bit, let's say, clumsy in the beginning, because people, what you usually see is that somebody like a CEO or a CFO, also in very small companies, right, steps up and takes the operational side so that the founder can be there, for example, but is not so interested in every aspect, but that there's a constant, from day one of a crisis, a constant day-to-day checkup. How are we doing? What are the actuals? And how should we respond? And park the plan, the official company plan, for a few weeks for a review later. Just keep the business going. So what I see in democratic Europe is people from upstairs getting much more involved into day-to-day running the business.
Right. So need that in India as well, be more hands-on.
Yeah, I think, that's a very pertinent question, given the times that we are in. And my sense is based on what I've been seeing, reading, hearing from experts and from various webinars and institutes, etc. over the last 6-7 months is, I think, there is a very, very, clear case, with regard to the benefits that these technologies can offer. And so than ever, even companies in India felt the need that they wish they had this, technology, because I think many companies in the FMCG, CPG, pharma, healthcare, and the essential sector, they were able to do better than their competitors because they had some level of, supply chain event management, system alerts. They had, system-wide visibility and transparency. So they were able to react to uptick in demand, much quicker than their competitors. And somewhere, some element of technology, maturity could have helped. So my sense is definitely this trend has been coming for some time, but COVID has only accelerated this trend. And my honest submission is, it's again my personal opinion based on what I've seen, and with regard to the manufacturing companies in India, I think this trend is only going to pick up from here, because there is no debating the fact in terms of what any startup or a startup like Nuvve can offer. And if a company is willing to come forward and even start with a small pilot. Okay, look at one area, start with some set of data, see how things pan out. Don't go big bang. Because I know, like you said, challenges now, if I were to walk into a CFO boardroom and ask for a budget, they're not going to give it to me. In fact, I have come across many friends of mine, who have worked in companies where they shelved all their technology projects because they were not, having any top line, no bottom line, no business. So they said, let's first send all our technology partners out, get rid of all our consultants, get rid of all our big project teams, and let's come back to brass tacks. Okay, this is a very practical, events that I'm sharing with you that have transpired over the last 4-5 months. But my sense is, from a very logical and from a long-term, operational and a business and a financial standpoint, I think, there is a lot of merit and a strong business case for tying up with partners such as Nuvve and, trying to learn from one another and start small. Take up a pilot approach, try and see if it is working. And I'm sure in the long run, it is going to be beneficial, because today companies which have done well have had some level of, practical visibility and transparency. And they have had, demand alerts coming into their system. They have been able to react quickly. So of course, the jury is out on this, but my sense is this will gain traction as we go ahead in the next few months. I don't see this abating, and I think this trend is only going to pick up. And if there are talented technology partners who can come on board and, who can give you flexible options, okay, in terms of, like I was alluding to, for example, why not use a, pay-per-use model or a software as a service model, or, use a technology on demand, so that, it's not really tough on your finances, but at the same time, it is giving the business and the back-end supply chain and the operations long-lasting benefits. Because what I clearly see is, what Suyog just said, I think I completely second that. You can't, really debate the potential long-term benefits that these solutions can offer. But I think it's very important for both entities to come on board and develop a business case, and understand what the, customer wants. Small, that's my sense. I will not say that a company should really, go big bang and competitor has done it, you also do it, because your level of technology maturity could be very different from your competitors, right? You may not even have an ERP, forget talking about an APO or an advanced scheduling tool. You may be using a very, very simple basic Excel spreadsheet, which has been working well for you. So why rock the boat, right? So, but again, to answer your question, Rishi, my sense is this is going to gain traction as we move on. That's my sense.
Okay, fair point. Let me ask Yog and Harsimrat here from your view of the interactions that you have been having with some of the companies. Yog, I know you mentioned about the data challenges, but give us a sense of some of the other things that Rutger mentioned. For example, the cultural differences, the involvement of management being hands-on, and especially in our part of the world. I know in terms of even demand planning, which is a statistical planning, which is like now decades old, people are still not ready in terms of skill set. Now here we are asking at the next level already, right? And this is again something that Rutger and Sunil mentioned. How do you see the preparedness of the teams within the companies to be able to work on technology like that to benefit the company operations in first place? So give us a sense of your observations from the other side of the table on these things.
Okay. So specifically talking about the India context, by the way, Rishi, we are actually amazing in doing a leapfrogging. The technology, we skip steps and we go to the latest one. So don't underestimate India, even though we have some steps completely missing. So our sense is very much clearly in terms of most of the organizations have only MRP level kind of planning systems in place. Scheduling is still being done manually. And as far as the connectivity part, getting the real-time data, as you know, lot of machines or lot of process-related information is not available. But that awareness is increasing. In fact, the kind of tractions we are getting from small companies as well, where there is willingness to have, so that evangelization that we need to go there is happening. Now, how much time will it take? It depends. Based on the top-down ownership or top-down sponsorship of this thing, Rutger was mentioning about the top floor, basically the first floor and the people on the shop floor. If there is a commitment there on the first floor, then things become very easy. But if there is no commitment from the first floor, basically things are not going to work out. As far as the data is concerned, there are, see, if you go to directly MSME level, of course, the data is almost at zero level. But let's say if you are talking for a mid-sized company, maybe say with turnover of around 100 to 500 crores kind of scenario. In that case, there are data, basically the data are not connected, data points are not connected, but there are some set of information available. In such scenarios, it is very easy to close the gaps by providing input screens to people where the things are being done manually. So those things are evolving. In certain cases, we integrate process data, product data, asset data, work center data, supply chain data. Now, you cannot have the data, in most of the cases, you won't have the data in all those layers, but some data elements would be available in some of these layers. This itself is a good starting point, because most of the time people, whenever there is a question of how are we going to real-time data, everybody is thinking about doing a big bang approach of, let me connect all my assets, let me connect all my process. You may or you may not need it at all, because there is no guarantee that whatever data your machines are producing may or may not be used in your planning application at all. You might just need few important data points. So though it is quite tempting for companies to say, no, we don't have data, it doesn't make sense to go ahead with this approach. Well, if they start with what they have already, that itself can be a very good point, because as Rutger was mentioning, you you have to decide at what point in time you change your plan, right? So it depends on what level of information you already have. So it might happen that, you know, whatever you are providing, it might just help you enhance it or refine it to a level where you don't have to change it. But so these slow inputs themselves can start adding value. And as you know, minor change, coming back to Sunil's earlier point of business case, even the slight change in planning actually have a bandwagon effect as far as the benefits are concerned, because that being the top process. So even though few data elements themselves are going to add some value to you because of this, because of the nature where planning is placed in the overall value chain. So yes, there are challenges in India, Rishi, to be specific to your question, but we are seeing the trend evolving. A lot of people are now opening up. On the planning side, we have seen this recent trend, so it is further going to catch up, because the positioning of planning is playing a very pivotal role in this whole value chain.
Yeah, and I think the broader point there is how do you make these technologies as simple as possible to use? Because fundamentally, I mean, if I compare it with something that we've got used to using every day now, like Google Maps or something to direct you in traffic, fundamentally it's the same concept, right? You are reacting to real-time information or as close to real-time information, and historically what's happened, and you're guiding somebody and then giving inputs, but ultimately it's the people themselves who have to take that decision in terms of what those systems are telling you. And fundamentally, if you can make it as simple as that, obviously the problem statement itself is much more complex, but the intent being how do you simplify the interaction with systems as far as possible, so that it's not about becoming a technology person, but being able to use that technology to serve your own needs is what really makes the difference, I would say.
Yes, and I think I will add to what Harsimrat just said. I was just thinking about it. I think, you know, users also get attracted and enticed, and they're excited to use the system if, you know, it enables a very user-friendly GUI, and also you're able to look at dashboards and use visual analytics, you know, in a very user-friendly format, you know, which can be directly shared with the top management. It can be shared with your team members, and you have a unique record of all the relevant parameters. Okay, say for example, safety, quality, production scheduling, okay, percentage defectives, etc. So if you can map all this, and if there is a composite dashboard, okay, or a graphic user interface which enables visual analytics also, I think I would say a large proportion of the battle is won. Because like Harsimrat said, you know, it should not add to, you know, the user complexity and, you know, make life difficult for them. On the contrary, if it is going to make life easier, smoother, and, you know, enable higher throughputs, better customer service, increase in demand, and if you're able to also, you know, analyze the, you know, the financial impact of all these operational decisions, I think that is where some of the critical success factors lie, to my mind. I think if these two questions can be answered fundamentally, I think then one can get into the nitty-gritties of, you know, what tool, technique, technology, or what sort of piece you can, you know, fit into which company, etc. But I think the GUI and the ability to, you know, for the user to use visual analytics, I think, because what you can see, I think conveys a lot, isn't it? In terms of the health of your business, of your supply chain, etc. So I think very, very valid points made by Harsimrat and Suyog. Yes,
Yes,
absolutely.
and the need to separate those different layers and those different functions. If you have a well-running SNOP process, you can use that to distinguish clearly, okay, where am I going to have my flexible day-to-day planning, and where do I keep, and in which team and meeting do I keep my company, running the company aspect. Yeah, so that just as a side remark. Yes, if you have a structured SNOP like a process, then you know, you integrate the changes that occur around you, including software changes and reacting to markets. You include that already in your process. Yeah.
Right. I also wanted to pick up from what Suyog said about you know, our ability to leapfrog. Suyog, I wanted to understand how important or how good it is for a startup community to leverage or help companies achieve that, especially because of the agility right? Say somebody like Nivi, which is in a startup space, it's more cohesively working across geographies, versus companies like Accenture, which are probably the European operations may not talk as much with India. From that context, how a startup can help companies do a cross geo learning much easier and better, and help them do that leapfrogging, because you see the operation somewhere which is done much better. So instead of doing 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, can a company jump from 2 to 5 easily with your help, or any startup for that matter, because you don't have to now go through the all journey, and you are directly working with 2 different geographies. Similarly, there could be learnings from this part of the world, even to Europe, if at all. So can startups play that role of a catalyst in that acceleration process? Is my curiosity. Anybody can chip in.
Okay, I will put forward my view, and Harsimrat and Rutger and Sunil can add to it. In my view, the advantage which startup provides as far as to smaller organization is concerned is the flexibility is just not in terms of giving the or providing the services. It is more about adapting to the local requirement. In more in complete productized versions which are provided by very large companies, generally it's a one size fits all kind of approach, because we have seen so many instances where, let's say, SAP workflows are not able to fit in because of the complexity as well as very niche nature of business. In such kind of scenarios, startups being flexible in terms of adoption because of various reasons, because of economic reasons, because of the nature of business itself, essentially gives ability to experiment with something which is specific to a problem of a small industry. So the propensity of a startup to be flexible, make changes to the product to adapt to a particular scenario are far more as compared to an Accenture, which will be taking the best processes, but they may or may not be very suitable for that particular industry. So I think startup by nature, by the definition itself, are quite easily suitable to solve those kind of problems, which are very niche or may not be picked up by very large players.
Okay.
Yes, I think
the only other thing that I probably would want to add is there's an aspect, an element of change management also, which is required for things like this, and those are areas which probably a startup maybe not be the best geared to kind of run that, because that requires a little bit of scale across the breadth of the organization, and startups by their very nature are not about scale per se. It's also it's just about agility.
I absolutely agree. And startups usually have strong founders and leaders, very focused on a result and not at all busy with what's going on day to day, right? That's why they are so successful. But like change management, it's not just not their thing, right? They're looking 2 years ahead. So yeah, it needs, and that's why I always say, by the way, talking about people who are trying to implement or work with such software initiatives like this, higher up. I understand budget are constraints and investors need to agree, but if you don't hire up on the planning side, your chances of succeeding constantly changing environment are just slimmer.
Correct. And I think, just adding to the aspects of culture and change management, just wanted to, also understand from Suyog and Harsimrat, one of you or both of you, if you were to maybe, start the engagement with a medium-sized company, for example. So typically, if you were to talk in terms of, implementation journey or timelines, etc. So is there, any approach that you adopt, because again, for many companies that are, talking to, potential startups and technology, companies such as yours, I think in addition to cost, I think time is also going to be a big factor, because I've been part of ERP journeys and implementations which have taken, sometimes 1.5, 2, 3 years. People come and go, and then I chip in. Then there is some legacy information that is given to you. So in this sort of a typical engagement with a client, so do you have any I would say range, timeline range by which you should try and succeed, or where the client can start seeing the benefits, etc., any handle on that, or have I asked a very complicated question? Just struck
No,
me.
no, you asked a very important question, and I will add third dimension, more cost, time, but most important, which we as a company always harp upon even before we start any engagement, is what is the business case. What we have seen based on last 6 years is a lot of times if this definition is not very clear, or if the value which anything is going to bring on the table is not clear, either to startup or to the stakeholder, basically it will always be a pilot. It will never go beyond that, and these are huge challenges, and we have faced it. It's not that we know it. It is just that we went through this cycle and then realized that till the time we are clear on this, we will never be able to be progress. So since last 3.5 years, our approach in terms of first thing which we start engaging with is identifying how much benefit you are going to get out of it and how scalable this idea is. Unless we are convinced with it, we don't go ahead. There are few instances where we have said that customer to come back till the time they are clear on it, we were not willing to start the engagement. So that is the first part which we do, because that is the most prime thing, even though it sounds very simple, but in most of the cases things don't happen on the ground. That is the biggest problem. But once that is established, then we have our standard time of 6 to 8 weeks of deployment, be it any maybe related to planning process, or be it on a single line, bringing predictivity, bringing predictability or real-time visibility. We do it in 6 to 8 weeks. Now the ROI would vary from case to case. We have seen the maximum ROI impact happening on the planning side, as well as if you start just bringing in the production visibility in the range of 15 to 20x within a time of around 12 to 18 months. We have seen it happening at that very large scale. So our durations are pretty fixed, around 6 to 8 or 8 to 10 in most complicated case, the deployment for a process, and then ROI of 12 to 18 months.
Very interesting observations there. I'll just take a question from Arjun here, and this is shifting it to these sectors. Now, what Arjun is asking, Arjun is with Decathlon in Cambodia. He's asking for the sector of healthcare and pharma. Wasn't technology and value chain transparency already a need pre-COVID due to the nature and criticality of product and business? And I would add to that and ask, are we seeing any sector-specific acceleration in these changes and requirement in planning post this COVID? As Arjun is pointing out that healthcare and pharma always had that need, and possibly they have gone fastest. But are you guys seeing any other sectors emerging with this need more than others? And Arjun has one another question, which I'll let him ask directly after this.
Okay. See, whatever observations we are noticing, it is not related to COVID as such. It is about the realization of getting the maximum value out of the information which is available or likely to be made available in the near future. Okay. So what we are seeing is more about the need of connectivity between the real time and the planning process. Now, in certain cases, it might be related to COVID, but in majority of the cases, we have seen that
it's always there.
And specifically talking about healthcare and pharma, where because of the regulatory pressures, the data itself is available at large scale. Then in such scenarios, we are finding that the connectivity is even simpler, because now you have already solved the bigger challenging piece of connecting. You already have the data. Basically, connectivity is happening. So we are about to start a project with a pharma company where they already have that data. What they lack is this connectivity.
So do you guys see more traction from a particular industry for what you are trying to do, or is it still across the industries, right?
Yeah, what we have seen in last 8-9 months across industry, we have talked to a chemical company, pharma company, a very large discrete manufacturing company, a company which produces boiler. Very similarly, we are seeing it across now.
Okay, that's pretty wide from capital to. Okay, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sunil, Rutger, anything?
Yes,
from
in fact, I don't know, Suyo, correct me if I'm wrong, because my sense was there is when lock, unlock and all happened in April, May, June, etc. And, people in India were still gaining clarity in terms of whether my warehouse or plant or production facility is in a red zone or a hotspot, or is it outside it, that affected, supplies, production, demand, service, etc. So, my sense was maybe, I don't know, till a few months back, was it more, tilted towards the, the essential space, more in the food, beverage, pharma, or, the CPG, FMCG space, because I think they saw inherent, higher demand, and which is where they started struggling. Then they felt that we wish we had a, system like this, which could enable more visibility, where we could fine tune our, production strategies to meet with the changing demand in the marketplace. So, my sense is only now it is slowly unraveling, because I'm not sure in the discretionary spending space whether people are, really, worried about these, solutions, because they are faced with a different problem. They have too much of pipeline inventory and dip in demand. So that was my sense. But what you possibly just said was interesting, because I thought it was slightly skewed in favor of, the essential industries or sectors coming from that space.
No, we are seeing it across for a very large paint company also, where there is actually a slump in demand right now. But we are seeing it pretty secular demand right now.
They are also willing to invest. I see. Okay.
Yes, same here.
That's interesting then. Okay, because I thought this, trend will, time to change.
No, I guess certain industries were already well placed to handle with crisis based on their own criteria. A high-tech, high-value company already has inventory control in place in a more frequent way than a company who do low-value products, maybe supermarkets. But right now, it's like Suyog is saying, right? It's across the board that people want better control of their day-to-day effect on the planet. And that could be for positive or for negative economic reasons, but because there are enough companies who are benefiting from this crisis.
Good for Suyog, I would say.
Absolutely.
All right. I would let Arjun ask his next question himself. Arjun, you can go ahead and ask.
Perfect. Thanks, Rishi. So I have a question which is a bit maybe off the context. So my question is primarily all the evolution which we have seen on, Industry 4.0 or Retail 4.0 or Logistics 4.0 over the past years. We have seen that evolution happen primarily to maximize throughput, to optimize and continuously improve your supply chain, and to generate higher efficiencies. But today, in the period where the fundamental push towards optimization and evolution, which is globalization and linkage, has now gone for a top-down approach and now is becoming more localization. How you guys feel is the new evolution will step in, which will take into account these problems? Today, we speak so many webinars about that technology is the way to support, which I concretely agree. But at the same time, we are in a period which never happened in 100 years. So how do you feel that this point in corporation, which was missed in 4.0 evolution, would take into account the next evolution on the full end-to-end supply chain?
Okay, you mentioned a couple of very interesting points. You talked about local optimization, you talked about end-to-end as well. See, this is something which whenever we are talking about Industry 4.0, people see, if you see what is the end goal of all this, end goal is basically transformation of the business model. The way business is being done is going to change completely in complete paradigm. Now, conceptually, it is always clear that whatever change or transformative change Industry 4.0 is going to bring in it has to be end-to-end. But the way things are being implemented in the entire manufacturing value chain, if you see, which you call it as local optimization, what is happening is focus is being just put on a particular process or on a particular part of a process and tuning that process end-to-end. So even though people are able to do the local optimization, essentially there is always a layer of global optimization. The challenge was everybody, since focusing on local optimization, basically it gave benefits only to a particular process or a particular section. The benefits were scattered rather than having a transformational view. As far as my understanding of Industry 4.0 or other retail or logistics 4.0 is that it has to be end to end. Means from paradigm perspective, I don't see very different than what it is needed right now. It was always like that. Maybe the implementation was restricted only to a particular process or only to a particular part. But now with this, maybe because of COVID or because of other aspects, maybe awareness has increased. Slowly things are moving towards end to end, and that is where there is a need now from process perspective as well as from the technology perspective, where there are abilities to connect different processes end to end and do this global optimization layer on top of already existing local optimization. As a company, we call it as a process digital twin. We believe that there is no value if we are focusing only on an asset or a particular process. It needs to be connectivity of processes end to end for the entire manufacturing value chain and achieve that global optimization. So we are quite convinced that what you just Arjun mentioned, that this trend is going to catch up. It is already catching up. People are realizing the benefit of it, and I believe that that has always been the end goal of Industry 4.0. Maybe interpretations were not done correctly so far, but that has been always end goal.
Thanks.
Anybody else would want to add to that?
Yes, I think I'll just, we just have about 3-4 minutes left. Maybe audience may have some questions to ask. But I think my sense is, again, I quite agree with what Suyog just said. I think in terms of the potential benefits and, the long-term picture, I think companies can definitely, evaluate these options. And I think there is a merit, in starting small, in doing a pilot, in, actually, and like Suyog rightly said, I think half the battle is won if the company knows where their pain points are and what are their operational priorities and problems. Okay, so should they really be rocking their boat, or should they be analyzing the right area to focus on? And if intelligent technologies like this can act as enablers, then why not? I think there is every sense in starting this journey. So that's my sense, and I think I will quite agree with what Suyog said. I think this will pick up. That's my view again. But I think we seem to be agreeing here. Yes, definitely there is going to be an uptick here. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys. Anybody else from the audience has any question? Please go ahead and ask.
Hello. Hi. This is Sheetal. With Aramile itself. So I had one question to all of you. So what are the key, macroeconomic or microeconomic factors which are coming into focus right now? Which are basically shifting the whole planning process from your end. What are those key factors which you believe we need to incorporate in the planning process, and are now they are just certain that they have to be taken into consideration for the planning process improvement? And I would love to listen from Suyog and Harsimrat, considering, and also from rest of the panelists as well. What are those key important parameters?
I think the planning professionals would be in a better position to answer this question than me, to be honest, unless Harsimrat wants to add a few aspects.
No, I think I agree. I mean, it's probably more a domain-specific question rather than technology-specific. So.
Okay.
But yeah, I think very quickly to answer, as both of you rightly said, I think this will vary from industry to industry. But in addition to the conventional operational parameters that we use, I think a lot of companies are trying to look at lot of data with regard to pricing and with regard to external economic factors which they can model. But again, these are easier said than done, because conventional models can only take you so far. Okay, because then you will be getting into a very complex level of programming and use of algorithms, where possibly all these cannot be factored in. But my sense is yes, definitely. I think for example, if you're in the commodity industry now, definitely many companies would be looking at how the commodity index is moving, and how does the price index look like. So I think these are some conventional factors which have been used and they will continue to be used. But again, it will vary from industry to industry because, like both my esteemed guests just said a while ago, because it depends more on the nature of the product, and it also depends on the type of the market you are in, and if you're only locally oriented, or as opposed to if you're geographically expands. So I think then many other variables will come into play. But to my mind, I think yes, basic economic factors like price sensitivity and pricing index, commodity price movements, etc. I think these would need to be factored in, and it will be good to work with a technology provider who can further help us to model these variables. Because I agree with Sheetal, the conventional methods will not work anymore because the forecasting output may not be robust. So there is a need to bring in additional variables. Yeah, that's my view.
Yeah, yeah. The discussion is then in such case all quickly going beyond the suitability of a software solution for one company, right? Especially if they are not huge companies, but a macroeconomic element that will count today very much is confidence. Just how much confidence do we have in the future, and which has been picking up right after our second wave now. Yeah, those are aspects that probably count in end-to-end demand planning and your S&OP process, but not when we're really discussing, the fact that there is a higher need today for reaction to live data than before, right? That's just the principle, and I guess that is what supports your conversation here. We see it across the board.
Right. And that has brought me to one question that I wanted to ask, possibly the last one for the day, is on demand sensing. So what we're talking about is the strong need for that. And one of the things that geographies and economies like India and perhaps Italy had was the large distribution-based business, right, where it is more of what we call here general trade. And I know Italy is pretty much similar from my days at Apple, and Rutger would agree with that. The issue is in that case is the collection of the data that we were seeing. But what this pandemic has done is it has created these hyper local delivery models for even larger companies. And what I was reading sometime back in a report by Deloitte is that companies have started investing in the technology at the mom and pop store level for this collection. So from that perspective, in technology, you think there is a space and again opportunity for startups to get in and now capitalize very quickly on that, implementing that technology, get that data in for the companies, and that would enable the first leg of the demand sensing, leading to the more a higher, better frequency of planning. So anything that Suyog, that you see from again from the other side of the table, and Rutger and Sunil, any observations on that front from you guys?
Okay, specifically talking about data collection, Rishi, as you rightly said, it has a lot of volume where the data can be picked up. But the question is how much value that work. I know that data has a value, but as far as getting the data at one basically collection mechanism, as such from value perspective is pretty mundane, more of an enabler rather than the end goal itself. So yes, there will be few startups which will be predominantly focusing only on that part, where the acquisition part becomes the most important one as a mechanism to it. I can talk about from our perspective, the real value add would come once we have this thing integrated together. So there will be space for people or startups who can focus only on that area. From our perspective, we look it as more enabler. So the focus is more on the analytics side, more on the optimization side rather than on the collection part.
Yes, I was talking about the sell-through data, the last tertiary sales, the mom and pop store sales, which gives you a true sense of the demand of your products, right? For any rather than the distribution or the second tier sales. That was
so.
Yeah, Sunil.
Even based on my experience, what I've sensed is in many demand planning teams and many S&OP discussions that I was a part of, there was always this need felt to get point of sale data. Because forecasters and demand planners inherently knew it is going to make my forecasting engine more robust. Because now frequency of planning has increased. It is no longer monthly, quarterly. Now people are talking about weekly, daily. Some companies are doing every hour planning, hourly planning actually, which is because they're able to get that data quickly into their system. And that is in driving their supply and distribution planning. So to just join the pieces that Suyog just said, it will help holistically only if that point of sale data is going to feed into your forecasting and demand engine, and therefore drive replenishment to the stores or the kirana store, etc. So my sense is, logically speaking, and from a system and algorithm standpoint, I think there is a lot of merit in getting the data. But the idea is, what is the quality, what is the volume, and at what frequency you're going to get the data? Is it going to be for a particular product line? Is it going to be for all SKUs? Or is, one day lag enough? But based on the discussions I have had, I think every person, every supply chain head has always made a presentation. My forecasting and demand planning will improve, and therefore supply planning will improve if I have a handle and visibility on point of sale data.
Yes, and
so my sense is, gainfully for your demand planning purposes, I think it will fit in very well, and for it. But again, like Suyog said, if it is only going to be a collection exercise, which is not going to bring in any intelligence or value add to your entire supply chain, then I think it's a futile exercise. But it has to be done intelligently, and kirana stores obviously need the technology maturity. You can't tell a kirana store to install SAP, right? He'll send me home then. So he'll have to have some sort of a middle engine which can link that data and which can be integrated with your ERP system. So there has to be some connector or middleware which can talk to his POS system and which can extract data on a regular basis, so that can feed into your demand planning engine. So that's how I would look at it. But there is a merit in it.
Sure. Rutger, you wanted to add something on that?
Yeah, basically going on that live data thing, right? I don't see, unfortunately, but maybe I didn't do enough investigation, I don't see a big increase in companies who are willing to share point of sale data. Unfortunately, because I was hoping the need in the market and behind the market in the manufacturing places is a lot higher now for the point of sale data. But I saw one example where people are just trying harder, but nothing more is coming from it. But I'll look better, yes, but I didn't see it yet.
Okay, that's
sad.
But that's sad. All right. I think what we need to do, this kind of call, we need a follow-up call on this and see how things are probably 3 months down the line, because we're just emerging from this. While, yes, like Suyog mentioned, what Nivi was saying was nothing to do with COVID, but the demand for these things had already started coming in. But I think what all of us agree that COVID did that acceleration to that from across the industries, and especially in economies like India, which was possibly wouldn't have done it so fast in many cases, right? So we should probably do a follow-up call and see how things are shaping up, maybe 3 months down the line. Hopefully that by then we'd have a vaccine from Pfizer or somebody else, and we'd have probably we would know for sure who is the president of United States, which is a bigger forecasting problem today than than anything else. But on a lighter note, but very, very interesting discussion. Some very good thoughts to chew on. So thank you, Suyog, Harsimrat, Rutger, Sunil. Great, and I would definitely probably come back to you sometime in Q1, and let's get together again to see how things are moving in. If Rutger found somebody a better trend in sharing the data in his part of the world, and let's see what Suyog and Harsimrat have to share again. But thanks again. That was a good, very, very good, insightful discussion. Thanks a lot for joining in today.
Thank you
for having us. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Rishi. Pleasure. Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye.